So ball played up into the offside towards the cover region. The batters cross for one. They're going to come back for a second. The throw comes in. Not a good one. And the batters do.
Welcome to the Tea30 Cricket Podcast, your source for the latest news and insightful commentary on the exciting world of cricket. On the panel this evening are Lenny Achaibar, Carl Bennett, Matthew Achaibar, and Dave Jaggernath. Do like, share, and tell a friend.
Here's a quick rundown of some of the local happenings as it relates to the Cricket League in the New York area. We start with the Metropolitan League. Metropolitan League is at very important stage. We get into the semi-final this week. And, of course, a couple of top teams already have booked their way to the last four. Westbury, who's always been part of Metropolitan League finals in so many years, one of the most successful teams across the Metropolitan League. Well, they will come up against Lucas, and of course, Villagers will take on Atlantis. By the way, the likes of Richard Allen, who has scored some 842 runs, will be spearheading Westbury this week. Hopefully, because I say hopefully because Richard Allen is part of the Somerset Cavaliers, the New Jersey Somerset Cavaliers, and they do have a game this week in minor league. So whether or not he chooses to stay at Westbury, we'll have to wait and see. The fact is, last week he played 12th, so we'll have to wait and see if he'll probably take the time off or he'll get the time off to be with Westbury. But Westbury has always been a competitive team. Richard Allen, top of the order, 842 runs. Carlos Green, another player with 435, and also a fella by the name of Brandon English, 332. Lucas, well, they'll depend heavily on the likes of Orville Crawford, 201 runs in the season. Vishal Singh, former Guyana senior player, with 131 runs. And Dave Hart, who's been around sometimes in the Metropolitan League with 115 runs. So Westbury, Lucas, of course, Westbury goes into that game as favorite, but you never know what can happen. In the other matchup, Villagers will come up against Atlantis. Villagers this year led by Tristan Coleman, 353 runs. Barrington Bartley, 185. McCarthy is there with 180. And we have got some new faces a part of the Villagers team. Atlantis, of course, will be led by Letren, 265 runs. The likes of Kellen Carmichael, Randy Wilson, Marvin Prashad, Ronaldo Mohamed Pestano. They're going to form the Atlantis team. So Villagers will take on Atlantis. Probably Villagers will probably be the favorite in that contest. But here again, you never know how the teams will fare. Over at the National League, well, things have heated up to such an extent that the 8 teams have already determined their destiny, and we've got one more week of regular league, and then the playoff starts with 8 team for quarterfinal, and then of course semi, and then the all-important final. The top teams there, and it looks like this is going to be the matchup when I look at the fixtures and coming into the last round. Queens United could take on Black Panthers. Queens United, they've played unbeaten so far. One of the top team, Romaine Morris, 657 runs. Orion Williams, 520. And they're going to lead the charge here for Queens United. They'll take on probably Black Panthers. And when I say unofficially, I'm looking at one playing 8. And these are from the points table. Coming into the final round this week, I don't see any upset. But other than that, it could be Queens United taking on Black Panthers. Black Panthers led by Renwick Batson, and it includes some guys from Sheffield, the likes of Hakeem Dotson and a host of other players. Then Everest could come up against MMZ. Everest, we all know, were the double finalists last year, won it both Saturday and Sunday, and they still include some top players. So watch for Everest ACS. They'll take on MMZ, who has been on a downward trend in the last 3 weeks. But they'll be hoping that they could get things back on track. So Everest looks like they will take on MMZ. Majestic could come up against Melbourne. Melbourne is one of the young team that is based at Baisley Pond Park, and they're playing excellent cricket for the time being. Sachin Sicharan and Naresh Bedesi, 2 of the top batters there, and they're playing at a wonderful venue. They have a lot of runs scored there from time to time. So Melbourne, you got to watch them. It looks like they'll take on Majestic, Derek Narain, Chris Patterson, and some of the other fellas there. And then Richmond Hill could take on Phoenix. Phoenix will be without Chandrapal Hemraj, who has been so amazing this season. Two formats, two Saturday and Sundays. Chandrapal Hemraj has about 1,100 runs combined between these two Saturday and Sunday leagues. So Richmond Hill, it looks like, could take on Phoenix. And like I said, this is unofficially, this is my prediction of how things will happen. There's still one more round to go this week, but I don't see any of the top team being displaced this week. So based on what I just told you, that those could be the quarterfinals. So
yeah, the 2023 Sunoco Minor League Cricket Championship is officially underway. Really in two divisions. We haven't seen much in the Central and in the South. We would have only seen the two Chicago teams in the Central and the Raptors and the Baltimore Royals in the South. But lots of action underway in the West and more particularly the East, which is where I'm sure we'll be covering a lot throughout the rest of this program. There was a lot of cricket. Mercer County Park was the venue for the opening weekend from Friday to Monday. It was somewhat of a shocking start. In some rainy, overcast conditions, it was the Manhattan Yorkers, a young Manhattan Yorkers side that really emerged victorious, really shocked the New Jersey Stallions, who a lot of people, including myself, before the tournament would have backed as the favorites to perhaps win the division. Not to be the case, at least judging by the first two games. We would have seen a really good bowling display from the Manhattan Yorkers, the likes of Nisarj Desai, Manoj Acharya, Dhruv Pawar, only 17 years old, minor league debut for him, would have gotten 2 for 6 from 4 overs, so really impressive stuff from the Manhattan Yorkers. And then Hiren Patel and Vandit Prajapati would have led a 6-wicket win quite easily over the Yorkers in the opening game, quite easily for the Yorkers in the opening game. 24 hours wasn't enough for the Stallions to turn things around. In fact, it got even worse as they went 0 for 2 against the Philadelphians. Did better with the bat, in my opinion, the New Jersey Stallions. Had a little bit of resistance from the likes of Jesse Singh, Raymond Ramratan, Cameron Delport. Stephen Wigg and Darren Davis played quite the hand at the end. Got to an even 100. But then Ryan Scott really took matters into his own hands for the Philadelphians, got a half century in very quick time. And once he got going, he was always going to be very difficult to stop. So the Philadelphians got 2 points heading into Sunday. And then we would have seen the Manhattan Yorkers and the Somerset Cavaliers rolled into town. And the Cavaliers wasted no time. We would have seen how bad of a start they would have had to last year, would have lost 5 games straight at the start. This year, off to a much better start, this Cavaliers lineup, and would have done quite well over the Manhattan Yorkers, made it quite an easy game. Chandrapal Hemraj, as mentioned earlier, got 56 or so in that game. And then afterwards, we'll head to the CPL for the Guyana Amazon Warriors and has made 400s in the New York National League. When you talk about how good the local New York players have done, well, not necessarily local in Hemraj's case to the U.S., but certainly spends a lot of his time here in New York, has gotten 400s this season in the New York National League spread across 2 different divisions. So he heads to the Caribbean with lots of form behind him. And then Monday rather, the points would have gone to Mother Nature as the rain would have prevented the Philadelphians and Cavaliers from playing what would have been a good top-of-the-table clash.
So I'm going to give some perspectives on one of the most enthralling series I think that we've witnessed over the course of the last several weeks, and that's, of course, the Ashes series between England and Australia. And to me, the Ashes now represents one of the most enthralling matchups of 2 cricketing giants that we've seen over the course of the last, I'm going to say, decade, maybe even 2 decades. The England team playing a different format of Test cricket than any of us have seen in quite some time, a brash brand of cricket that they refer to as baseball, is they have taken the world by storm, effectively. They have changed the way that Test cricket is being played and almost playing it in kind of a white ball format where the batters come out very aggressive, very attacking. They try to post big totals in very in a limited number of overs. They score quickly and try to bat the other teams out of the games. So over the course of the last, let's say, year and a half to 2 years, between the series that England played against India, when they went down to Pakistan and dominated them in Pakistan, winning all the tests there, coming back, playing another game against India in England, and then sort of emerging into this Ashes series, they have taken the game by the scruff of the neck and really have been an entertaining bunch. So this matchup against Australia, who have been one of who's been the top team in terms of Test cricket. They won the Test cricket championship early in the year. It promised to be like the battle of the giants, so to speak. And the matchup was as promised. Both teams showed up and delivered. And while the series ended as a 2-2 draw, Australia, having been the defending champion, so to speak, or having won the last Ashes, effectively retained it. And as I said, while it was a 2-2 draw, it turned out to be, to me, a series that England, for the most part, dominated. They lost the first 2 tests. The third test got rained out. And, actually, the third test they won, England won. The fourth test got rained out, and then England came back and won the fifth test. In all the games, pretty much very closely contested. And in fairness, but for the brashness of the approach that England took, perhaps Australia could have been batted out of every single game. That said, the Australians showed up and showed why they are the real Test champions. They hung in and played what we would say traditional cricket, batting for time, batting through very tough and difficult conditions. And so credits to them to really hang in there and actually win, and winning the first 2 tests, against the odds, so to speak. And so from that standpoint, they hung in and really delivered an Ashes series of epic proportions, one that I think any cricket enthusiast will remember for decades to come. We saw some emerging talents coming out on both sides. On the English side, certainly we saw the likes of Josh Crawley, who had a dashing innings of almost scoring a double hundred at Old Trafford. We also saw some really good performances on the Australian side. One young spinner coming through that they opted to utilize. And so all in all, I would say to cricket enthusiasts who didn't have the opportunity to pay close attention to the Ashes, even if you want to go back and look at the scorecards or just catch any of the summarized games, either on YouTube or on the cricketing outlets, you would see some really exciting brand of Test cricket, and it gives me hope that Test cricket truly is not dead, as we've heard people say. Test cricket has seen its better days. This England Australia series almost took us back to the heyday of West Indies in the late 70s, early 80s, and even to the great Australian teams of the 90s and 2000s. And it's well worth the watch. And it's just exciting cricket, day in, day out. So I would suggest that those who didn't have the chance to go and catch any of that cricket, look out for that and look out for this England team. They really play exciting cricket. And I believe they're, to the extent that they continue to play that brand of cricket, it can really mean an uplift in Test cricket as we look forward.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to the initial thought of how attacking England have been, I think Australia as well, when you look at how those two sides match up, it's really an even contest in the sense that, yes, we all know how traditional Test cricket is played, and we know both of those sides have what it takes to really bat there all day. They've got very good bowling on both sides. But particularly when it comes to what Brendan McCullum has done with that England side, I mean, yeah, going back to Zach Crawley's 189, that was like a run a ball, maybe just above run a ball 100. And that's something I feel you don't really see a lot of in Test cricket, which is kind of surprising because of maybe the popularity that T20 cricket has gained. One thing I'm surprised it hasn't really bled over a lot to a lot of nations with Test cricket is maybe just to really go out on a limb and maybe include a couple of T20 players, even if it's just one or two attacking batters in that Test lineup, just so that way you can really take advantage of it. Because when you look at a field in a Test match, it's usually always in. So England and what Brendan McCullum has done with this England side, and Australia have done it to an extent too. When you look at Travis Head, a lot of the runs Travis Head has scored, he scored in very quick time. One thing that has really been surprising was how little teams have really used that. You've got so much attacking batters in the world now from all different countries because of how much traction T20 cricket has gained. I wouldn't mind seeing a couple more of them in their respective Test lineup just to really take advantage of the field being in. Just to go out there, play a couple of shots, and in Test cricket, the way the field is, you're gonna get reward. You're gonna get a good reward of it.
Yeah, and to the point that Matt just raised in terms of the T20 batters in this format, England actually has even though we're considering these guys Test players, if you think to Zach Crawley now, I mean he's actually now suggesting that he is actually looking to declare his availability for the IPL. These guys are in effect playing, a lot of white ball cricket in the normal course of them just traveling around the world. So between him, Moeen Ali was added, for a couple of games while he was fit. Moeen Ali is effectively a white ball, almost a 100% white ball player these days. The likes of Ben Stokes, Johnny Bairstow, those guys are all sort of white ball guys. On the Australia side, Steve Smith plays a lot of white ball cricket. We have Travis Head as Matt mentioned, the likes of Cameron Green. Those guys play a lot of white ball cricket. So it tends to factor that some of these players are starting to bleed in. They may not be purists as white ball players, but they're starting to bleed into the Test arena, and they're using their ability from white ball. And we have actually seen this now sort of bleed over into the Pakistan series as well, where a lot of the Pakistani batters are being more aggressive. Some of the Indian batters are being more aggressive in terms of how they approach the game. So I think slowly but surely, I think you might see this sort of bleed over a bit more, particularly if England continues to enjoy the level of success that they have. So there's still more to come there. But it just spells for a very exciting prospect for what that sort of cricket, what that format of cricket can look like as we head into 24 and into 25, and how teams start to make that adoption.
Yeah. Look. I think some of the best Test team these days will be built around players who play all three formats. All right. We see a lot of players that have really formed the core of many Test nations. They play all three formats. Dave, what do you think?
No, I definitely agree. That's one of the same thing I've been saying about West Indies. They need to get out of having three different formats for players. Every format West Indies have different players. They need to have at least 70% of their players playing all three formats in order to start competing in Test cricket again. At least that's what I think.
Yeah. The problem with that is that West Indies, to a large degree, lacks some of the quality, the depth that some of these other nations might have. And so when I think through, players like Craig Brathwaite, who is a stalwart for the West Indies at the test level, Craig plays very little white ball cricket. He doesn't really even play in the CPL and some of the local limited overs or white ball league. So in effect, he's sort of been pigeonholed into being a Test player. Yeah. Then when I think about guys like Pollard and guys, these guys are on the other side of their career, I might say, and even like Nicky Poor and Hetmeyer and some of these guys. Like I could not really see these guys in the test arena anymore because they don't really have the patience for that kind of cricket. And so
And I will,
that's where I think there is a little bit of a disconnect.
I will go see a test team with Puran and Hetmeyer in it.
I would too.
You know, it will get exciting. I would rather watch, you know. And Craig, if Craig and Tage wants to improve their game, they need to start playing some white ball cricket.
Yeah, look, my take on it is that a lot of these international players. Let's for example talk about West Indies. And I think one of the reasons why the West Indian player don't get a chance to play all three formats is that administrators and people who plot these guys' career or who help navigate their careers don't really lead them in the right way. A lot of times, sometimes we can say, well, a guy is a T20 player because that's all you pick him for. So he
Yep.
becomes that product because you think that he's that. Like, for example, look at Rakeem Cornwall. I personally think that Rakeem is playing in the wrong format. The reason being, even if he bowls good or whatever, he can't run in test cricket. When he comes out to bat at 7, he's there to probably make singles, take ones, take two. He won't be able to run. He got to play a format in which he's licensed to really hit the ball, score boundaries, and forget the running.
Yeah, in saying that though, and I'm glad you actually brought up Rakeem Cornwall because Rakeem Cornwall is a product of how poor West Indies cricket has, or where West Indies cricket has fallen. And I say that to say that Rakeem Cornwall deserves his place in any West Indies team that he gets picked for. Why? Because this guy, if you look at his statistics, batting-wise, his batting average is higher than most of these players that are on the teams that he's on. Bowling-wise, this guy's bowling down all these teams in local regional cricket. So he selects himself in a sense by what he's doing to the players in the local leagues that they're playing. Now,
Yeah,
what does that say about the quality of the players there? If Rakeem Cornwall can dominate these players, it just tells players who are probably, to Lenny's point, much fitter than he is. He is a heavyset guy. For those who don't know, Rakeem Cornwall probably weighs 300 and change. Like he's a heavy guy. But he shows up and he'll come and bowl 20 overs for you in a 4-day game. 20 overs in a day by himself in a 4-day game and continue to bowl. And again, he doesn't run around and when he goes to the wicket, he's just hitting the ball for boundaries. But that said, he picks himself by performing, and the other players who are supposed to be much more fit than he is, they don't deliver the goods, and therefore, again, it underscores where the mighty West Indies, the levels to which they have fallen.
yeah. I saw yesterday in Guyana, and Dave probably would have seen it. They forgot to mark the 30-yard circle.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Again, this is international level cricket that we're seeing, and I mean, it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace.
Dave, I'll give you the final word to, give us your full insight into the need for the players to, participate in all three formats of the game.
Well, Test cricket, for example, we follow a lot of the West Indies Test cricket on social media. We don't go watch, but there's no atmosphere, so there's no mental strength that those guys are gaining in playing Test cricket. So the level of West Indies Test cricket is going down. Now, if you get players playing in all three formats, they will then understand what it is to play in front of a crowd of 40, 50,000 people. That will give them a different mentality of to play. Look, not to say the Test players are boring, West Indies Test player, but let's be straight, they are. And nobody wants to watch it. Can Craig and Tage get better? Possible, but they need to play the other formats to understand how to pick up the tempo and all that stuff. Now, another thing with West Indies, we're the only team that our pace bowling sucks. Sorry, I say those words, right?
Technical term. That's a technical term.
Right? Look at our pace. India become better than us at pace bowling. Over the past 10 years. I mean, what are we doing when it comes to pace bowling? We got a guy like O'Shane Thomas. They said, oh, he's not fit. Man, O'Shane Thomas will be in my testing any day. I don't care if you give me. I just need 6 over out of him from each spell. That's it. O'Shane Thomas is what 6'5", bowls at 150. He would trouble any of the Indian batsmen or whichever batsman you put in front of him. Because Test cricket is a different level of batting. You guys were just talking about England. England is changing it a little bit, but still people are still playing proper cricket in Test cricket. So with O'Shane Thomas running in bowling at 150, is definitely they're gonna think twice. This is not T20 they're playing. So yeah, for me, O'Shane will be in my Test 11 at all any day. I'm surprised he's sitting down right now.
Fitness
again. The man is put down for 3.
He doesn't spend enough time staying fit.
But here's the thing: he's been in the camp for the past month.
He's kind of running back into shape now. He was playing in England for a little bit, so he's kind of getting himself back into shape. But for probably half of last year, if you saw O'Shane just on the street, you wouldn't know that this guy's a cricketer.
No, man, I saw him in last year. He looks pretty decent. But
he's been in better shape, and when O'Shane. So I don't know when you saw him how much he looked like he weighed. I think O'Shane at maybe like 190, 200-ish is probably at his peak. When I saw him last year, he was about 220, 225. He looked like a boxer more than a cricketer. So, but again, he's working himself back into shape. They have recalled him to the West Indies squad, so that's a good sign that all is not lost. And so we can kind of see where he
West Indies
goes from there.
Test team more exciting. Right now it's boring.
Yeah. I mean, one thing, if I can add in here, is that there is one particular player. Well, there's a couple, but there's one particular player that, for me, I think has really stood out when you look at in comparison to the rest of the side in the ODIs that they've played recently, and it's Kesey Carty. I think has done quite consistently in terms of how his performances have been relative to everyone else. And I found it quite surprising that Kesey Carty isn't really in the test setup a lot more often, because I find him as a lot more of a take your time kind of batsman, someone that can really construct an innings and build an innings quite well. So the fact that he's in the ODI team, which I think is a good start, but not really broken through into really the test team. And then going back to the fact that we need to mold him into all 3 formats, Kesey Carty hasn't even been picked in the CPL. Not at all. He hasn't even been picked. And he's a West Indies international. So I find that very surprising. Like if you're trying to mold, especially the younger players like Kesey Carty coming onto the scene, if you're trying to mold them into all 3 formats, you're not including him in a format he'd probably be better suited in, which is Test cricket, and then you're not even picking him to develop him into a more all-around player in terms of the T20 franchise league, the premier T20 league in the Caribbean. So that's just one example. Joshua Da Silva is another player I can use as an example. In the CPL for the St. Kitts and Nevis Patriots, Joshua Da Silva has opened the batting a few times, and I've seen Joshua Da Silva, and he's got a reputation as being in the test team as much more of a slower batter, one that can really, similarly to Kesey Carty, take his time and construct an innings. But Joshua Da Silva, in a couple of games, he showed a couple of glimpses of it in the CPL in a couple of years he's played. When he opens the batting, he has the potential to really get the Patriots off to a flyer. There's a couple. I remember there was a game against the Amazon Warriors. I think he got a 50 or something. And Joshua Da Silva opened the batting, and he looked really good in the power play. Drove the ball very nicely, played all along the ground. Then when the power play was done, had the muscle, had the ability to take the ball out of the ground. So I think as players like that, you really have to just keep pushing them. Like Kesey Carty, I mentioned, isn't even in the CPL. Joshua Da Silva is in the CPL, but I don't know if he's really going to play that much with the likes of Evan Lewis, Andrew Fletcher, Dewald Brevis in that top order. So yeah, that's just another part of the reason why the West Indies might be struggling the way they are.